My name is Hyla Pitzenberger, and you're about to watch my disability presentation for HPR 2120. For my disability, I chose the topic of blindness. Blindness is hard to define because there are many different ways to define it, and it kind of depends upon the person you're talking to. Many people regard blindness as the inability to see at all. Others distinguish levels of blindness based upon an individual's ability to discern light from dark. Because there are so many definitions of this disability, the National Federation of the Blind takes a very broad view. They believe a person is blind if that person's vision is bad enough that even with corrective lenses, a person cannot see or participate in day-to-day activities in the same manner as a person who is not blind. The clinical definition of legally blind is that central vision acuity must be 2200 or less in the good eye with the best possible correction, or that the visual field must be 20 degrees or less. And this is just an interesting fact. There is no generally accepted definition for visually impaired, low vision, or vision loss. They only define blindness. As previously stated, there is no one definition for blindness, and I think that these two different definitions show that, because if you look in the Oxford Dictionary defines blindness as the state or condition of being unable to see because of injury, disease, or a congenital condition. But if you look in the textbook for HPR 2120, Joseph Winnick and David Peretta define blindness as an impairment in vision that even with correction adversely affects a child's educational performance. It is estimated that several million people in the United States are blind. For all ages, it's a little over 7 million people who are blind. Women seem to be affected more than men, and young people between the ages of 16 and 64 seem to be affected more than those who are 65 and older. It is difficult to really get statistics on blindness because almost all statistics are estimated, which means that the numbers are not exact. There are government agencies like the United States Bureau of the Census, the National Center for Health Statistics, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics that take samples of people and then project those numbers onto the general population. They are using statistics to do that, which is not exact, it's a science. And because they're using statistics, there is a margin of error. However, the technology is very advanced, so this margin of error is small. Blindness affects all ethnicities. However, it seems to affect white and Hispanic people more than other ethnicities. This is our first activity for this video. It's kind of a scavenger hunt. All you have to do is follow the link listed, read through the chart that shows blindness by state, and put in the discussion box on Pilot which state has the highest number of people who are blind. The education of people who are blind is greatly impacted by their disability. As you can see from the statistics listed on this page, only about 32% of people graduate with a high school diploma, while only 15% of people who are blind graduate with a bachelor's degree. As a reference point, people who are not blind graduate with a bachelor's degree at a rate of about 30%. As you can imagine, based upon educational statistics, income potential is lower for people who are blind compared to people who are not blind. The median annual earnings of somebody who is blind is about $38,000. And the number of people living below the poverty line who are blind is about 1 million people. Now we're going to transition into some of the characteristics of people who are blind and things that are important to recognize in children particularly, because it's very important to detect blindness early on and treat people who are blind, because treatment can prevent a visual impairment from becoming full-on vision loss. In children, there are some physical signs. So a lot of times you'll see them crossing their eyes in towards their nose, or they'll turn their eyes out towards their ears. Their eyes will flutter in odd directions and more than normal. And then their eyes will appear like they don't focus on you. So the American Academy of Pediatrics recognize the importance of early detection for this, and they now recommend that children have their eyes checked as babies during every regular well visit through the first couple of years. And then once that kid hits 5, they should begin to have a routine eye exam every year. Another characteristic of somebody who is blind is clumsiness. Somebody might have a vision problem if they appear to be excessively clumsy. Poor vision might be the problem when a person is constantly running into things or falling down. They may have depth perception problems. And all of this is because the eyes provide info about our surroundings. So if you can't see what's going on around you, you're going to run into things. You're going to trip over things, and you're going to appear clumsy. Clumsiness occurs when the eyes misjudge or can't see the proper distance. And this is another fun fact. A lot of times children who do not walk well actually have problems with their vision because they can't see where they're going. They don't walk there because they can't see, and it scares them, and so on and so forth. This is another characteristic more specific to children, but I think it also goes along with adults that we have worked with. Some children who have vision problems appear to have short attention span, and others may blink more frequently than normal or squint whenever they read or watch TV. Now, often kids who are blind are sensitive to bright light. Children who are blind or visually impaired might also sit close to the television or hold books they are reading close to their face. Another thing that is often a problem for people who are blind is their hand-eye coordination, because they can't see their hands as well as we can, so they don't coordinate between their hands and their eyes as well. This is true for adults, and it's also an early sign in children. And it's different at different ages. So older kids might have difficulty more with sporting activities or projects in class. Younger kids may have more issues with things like throwing or catching a ball, tying their shoes, or copying schoolwork from the blackboard. Mobility for people who are blind is very different for people who are not blind. We don't think about it very often, but the world we live in is very inaccessible to people with disabilities. People who are blind tend to not want to leave their house because they don't know what's outside of their house. people don't stop anymore for people with canes because people don't know that they're supposed to stop. And I think this is part of this statistic, but only about 8% of people who are blind actually use a cane to help them navigate. And only about 2% of people who are blind use a guide dog. The rest of them either use a sighted guide, who is another person who can see, or they just don't leave their house. According to Lee Erickson and Von Schrader, only a little over 29% of adults aged 21 to 64 years old with a visual disability were working full-time. That means that 70% of people who are blind are not working full-time, which contributes to the large number of people who are blind who live below the national poverty line. When working with people who are visually impaired, you have to remember that they can't see, which seems silly, but we often forget that that person has a disability and they can't see that we're going through a doorway or that we're going up a staircase and those different kinds of things. So you have to constantly communicate with them what you're doing. So when you go through a doorway, you have to say, hey, we're going through a doorway. Get behind me, or just be careful not to run into the side. Same with stairs. You have to tell them that you're going upstairs, and you have to make sure that you're placed on a side of them where they can hold on to you to guide them up the stairs, but they can also hold on to the railing if they want to. And people who are blind can play games and they can be active, but there are adaptations that have to be made. They're easy adaptations to make, you just have to be aware enough to make them. So, ball games. You can play soccer and basketball, maybe baseball, and all of those different kinds of games with somebody who is blind. You just have to put bells in the balls so that they can hear them and work with them, and you might have to actually take their hands and move them through the motions of playing that game before they can play. But they're still capable of playing. They're also very capable of going to the gym and working out, but if you're working with them, you have to be very aware of your surroundings. You have to be aware of obstacles in the gym. Things like people leaving bags on the floor, or weights on the floor, or water bottles on the floor, or people working out on the floor in the middle of the gym and not making very much noise. And you also have to be aware that oftentimes people who are blind have balance issues because they can't see, and that lack of sensory input into their brain messes with their balance. And so you just have to help them navigate and balance themselves. You can adapt sports for people who are blind fairly easily. Just because they're blind doesn't mean they can't play. They just have to be able to hear the ball. So goal ball is great because, one, you put bells in the ball and they can hear it coming to them. Two, it eliminates a tripping hazard. For basketball, you'd keep the tripping hazard, but you can put bells in the basketball, and that enables them to hear where the ball is going. You can also take a cane and hit the basketball hoop so they can know where they're going. You can play soccer. You just have to put bells in the ball so that they can hear it, and you may have to play a little bit slower while their balance adjusts to playing that game. Same thing with volleyball. You can play, but it would be a good idea to put bells in the ball so that they can hear where the ball is and be able to hit it. These are my references. I hope you guys enjoyed my video and found it informative. Thank you for watching.